So you want to get started in the miniature painting hobby. Well, hopefully this video helps you out. This is going to be my small little summary of what I've discovered as sort of a beginner painter. I would still consider myself a beginner, uh, an amateur, and this is just going to be a video explaining some of the basics that you need to get into the hobby and see if you really like it. This is more of figuring out how to do a test run rather than jumping full force into it, because that could be a mistake. But so the first thing we're going to talk about is you need an object to paint. You need minis, miniatures. You can do what I do and 3D print them. I'll have a video on that later. Or you can go to the store and buy some. There are a couple different options. A lot of people in the hobby love things by Games Workshop, and that has a whole slew of extra tools that are involved and that you need. I recommend starting out with they're like WizKids minis or Reaper miniatures. They're cheaper miniatures you can get at any of the local game stores that you might have. They're cheap. They're usually $6 or $7 for a 2-pack of just small little minis. And yeah, that's a great way to get started. It's nice and cheap. If you go with the Games Workshop models, they're a little more expensive and they involve more work because they come on sprues. So they come as a sheet of plastic and they have a whole bunch of little parts. You have to cut the parts out, sand them down, and then glue the models together. So you actually have to build the models. So that involves extra glue, and then you need a hobby knife or a pair of cutters that help you cut them close, like a pair of flush cutters. And that helps you put them together. So you need those, sanding, like some sandpaper, sanding blocks, little emery boards for nails work really well for that, but those are an extra expense if you go with the Games Workshop. Now, once you have your minis, you need something to hold them with when you paint. You don't want to get paint all over your hands when you're painting, so you want to get a holder. I use little pill bottles, just old pill bottles. Sometimes I fill them with like beans or something else, and I mean, you don't have to. You can just use them empty. I fill them to weight them down a little bit because they do tip over and you don't want to snap your minis. Okay, after you have that, you have it attached, you need to prime it. Can't paint on smooth plastic, so you have to prime it with a primer. I use a just cheap acrylic, it's gesso or gesso that is from the local hobby store, and that's what I use. They do sell rattle cans. They make other like actual miniature based primers or miniature oriented primers rather, and they work really well. All of them do. The spray cans I like, but they only work if you're in the right zone, like temperature wise. You can't be too cold or they don't work as well. They're also pretty expensive for a can of the miniature paint spray. It's like $16 to $20 a can. But once you have the primer, then you need to go get your paints. They have paints in pots, squeeze dropper bottles, all sorts of different containers. The most common that I've found in local game stores are by Citadel, which are pots, and then usually Army Painter is the other brand that they carry, and both are good in their own right. They both have pros and cons. I will do future videos on those, but if that's all you have, I would recommend getting 3 or 4 colors, painting with those, seeing if you like the hobby. If you don't even want to spend that much money, you can go to Walmart and get cheap little apple barrel paints that are $2 to $3 a piece. Get a few paints and then see if you like painting with them. If you don't like painting the minis, you're not out that much money. After you get the paints, you need something to paint with. You need your brushes. I would recommend starting with a cheaper pack just to see if you like painting in the hobby. Get one of those big multi-packs at a store, like $4 for 10 brushes. It's pretty cheap. They're decent brushes, I think, for getting started. Once you have those, you can upgrade to a little bit more expensive brushes. I don't have like the $30 brushes that they make. I don't want to spend that much money on a brush, and I don't feel like they do a job more than what I can do. I'm not quite at the skill level I would recommend to being spending that much money. If you have that money and want to spend it, go right ahead, but I'm trying to save you a little bit of money and possibly time if you end up not liking it. Once you have your brushes and your painting, you need a cup of any sort, a mug, something to put water in to rinse your brushes out. You don't want to be mixing all your colors. You'll get a bunch of nasty browns and blackish brown colors. You want to... I use little leftover cereal bowls from, like, bring home packs of cereal from my kids. Just disposable little plastic bowls. They work really well. Anything will work though. Anything that can hold water and you don't mind possibly ruining with paint getting stuck to it. The last thing I would say is helpful, not necessarily need or necessary, is a palette of some sort. Something to put your paint on. You can paint right from pots if you're using Citadel or Privateer Press. They use little pots and you can paint directly from there if you want to save the money on getting a palette. There are some really good guides out there on making your own palette. I myself bought mine because I didn't want to deal with trying to find all of the different parts to make it. I don't have a bunch of Tupperware or anything laying around, so it was just a lot easier, a lot more of a time save for me to purchase a palette and go that route. There are dry palettes and wet palettes. Dry palettes don't hydrate the paint, so your paints can dry out, but you don't run into that issue if you go right from the pots. I recommend a wet palette. It has helped me, but it just holds the paint a little bit better. It makes it moist for a longer amount of time, like 2 or 3 hours. So if I'm painting, I can usually go a whole session. Maybe the next day they'll be okay. Just have to judge it by what it looks and feels like when you're painting. But those are my suggestions. It's what I've figured out is best. Those are what are actually necessary in order to get into the hobby. I myself have some extra stuff I'll talk about in a future date, but that's what you need to get started is minis, something to hold it. It can be something cheap, just a chunk of wood. Need your primer and paint, and then you just need something to paint with and clean your brushes with, like water. And you can just use a little bit of dish soap to rinse out the paint left over when you're done painting for the day. So I hope this helps someone just get a little kit of things together. And it's pretty easy to get started in the hobby. Once you're in it, you'll start spending a lot more money, but that's okay because it's a learning process. This is just hopefully a good guide to help you figure out if you like painting, get into it and give it a shot. But I really hope that you have a great time for the rest of your day or evening whenever you're watching this. And yeah, this is my first time editing a video, so I'm sorry if it was a little rough. I hope you have a great night. If you like this, give me a subscribe and a like, and that would be appreciated. It would help me a lot. All right, have a good time. Love you guys.